The Titans have a number of former draft picks, now veteran players who are in danger of losing their jobs this offseason. We're going to talk through the list of the guys we think who are most likely to be cut as former draft picks of the Tennessee Titans. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville in partnership with 440 Sports. I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo. Justin, another week of dead off-season. How is it going?
Doing well, yeah. This is a topic I've been wanting to hit for a couple of weeks. I think it's interesting when you start looking at Titans regime change, new general manager, draft picks that he inherited, guys that he didn't pick himself, who are starting to be at the end of their line. The rope is getting shorter and shorter, the leash is getting shorter, and they might cut bait with at training camp, as they go from 90 to 53. Who are some of those Titans draft picks, if you will, that are fighting for their roster jobs? We've identified, 4 or 5 surefire ones, and then you want to throw in a couple spicy names just for the sake of spicing up this conversation, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, because I think we'll start this list with some guys who are pretty obvious. Like, I think if you're watching this, actually, here's a fun exercise. If you're watching this, before we give any names, drop them in the comments. Who do you think we are about to talk about? Which veteran cut candidates that were former draft picks, not free agent signings, on a different regime?
UDFAs, guys the Titans drafted in the last 3-4 years, let's call it.
Yeah, so put your answers in the comments below. And while we got you here, why don't you subscribe to the channel, join the Titans diehard community here at the MCA Titans podcast, hit that subscribe button, and drop this video a like. That'll help us out and reach, a wider audience of people. And Justin, real quick, before we get into this conversation, we have to tell people if they missed the last full pod, we have some exciting stuff going on. Well, not us specifically, but Sinkers Beverages has some really exciting stuff coming up here. It's the Sinkers 40th birthday jamboree, August 9th at 5:30 p.m. Justin, the Titans' first preseason game is August 9th at 6:30 p.m. Wow. So before you watch Cam Ward take his very first snap ever, head over to the Basement East in East Nashville, August 9th, 5:30 p.m. for Sinkers' 40th birthday jamboree. There will be tons of live music, multiple bands playing. They're giving away a bunch of free stuff. Tickets to get in are only $10. That comes with 2 free drink tickets. That $10, that's what you pay for 2 drinks. It basically pays for your price of admission. And you get a free gift bag full of swag. All proceeds for your $10 tickets go to benefit the Martha K. O'Brien Center in East Nashville. Link to get your tickets is in the video description. So come out, have a good time, support a good cause. Sinkers Beverages, check out the event coming up. All right, Justin, let's get into this conversation here. Like I said, we're going to start with some names that might be a little more obvious. And the first one that I'm going to throw out there, and then I'll throw it to you to throw one out there, is a guy who is in a position room that had a lot of question marks coming into the offseason, that is now a lot more crowded maybe than we were thinking it would be or even expecting it to be. And that guy, I think everyone can guess who I'm talking about, is Treylon Burks, a former first-round pick, the guy who came in with lofty expectations because of the situation surrounding the Titans drafting him right after they trade A.J. Brown. They used the pick that they got for Brown on Treylon Burks, hoping that he would sort of be the A.J. Brown replacement. And he simply hasn't ever lived up to those expectations. Part of it is the health. He can't stay healthy, or at least he's had a lot of trouble doing it. Flashed at times, but never was able to put it all together consistently. And now that there is, a new regime, like you mentioned earlier, and all this fresh meat in the wide receiver room, I think it's almost a foregone conclusion that Treylon Burks will not be a member of the 2025 Titans.
I agree with you, and what I want to add is I'm fascinated to see how they handle this. Like, do they outright cut him, or do they try to find a unique solution? Do they, try to trade him? Number one, try to trade him. People say that they throw that around like it's easy. He's got to get healthy, number one. Like, he's still dealing with the ACL. He was not full go at camp. They said all the right things, good progress, doing some individual stuff. They hope he'll be available for training camps in 4 weeks. Like, we don't know what that's going to look like at the beginning of training camp. Or maybe he starts it on the pup training camp, right? Like, maybe he's not even ready to go for training camp. So you can't trade him if he's not healthy. Do you outright cut him? Well, you can't always do that either if he's not healthy, right? There are a ton of, injury guarantees and other things that go into that, and, CBA protecting injured players from losing their jobs. Do they try to stash him for the whole year. But he's a free agent, so you don't got control over him next year anyway. I just think this is the most complicated and, of course, the most exciting conversation probably of all these names that we're throwing out there. I don't know what's going to happen to him. Like every time I do a roster projection, I've got 7 names on that list, and he's not one of them. And now that includes Bryce Oliver and Xavier Restrepo, 2 guys who probably aren't locks to make the team. It also includes Van Jefferson, who I think some people may not consider a lock. So there's room for Treylon Burks to beat out one of those guys for sure. First-round picks always have a longer leash, and you're more patient with them than anybody else. They could probably cut Bryce Oliver, put him on the practice squad, and if they love what he does on special teams, call him up, right? Practice squad call. Remember, last year, they went into the season with 4 corners on the 53-man roster, and they would elevate one for the first 4 weeks. Then you're going to have injuries, you're moving guys to IR, then you could promote. Like, there are ways around this, right? That there's not always the most exciting thing to talk about, but these things do happen. So maybe they're going to get creative with Treylon Burks. I don't know. Has he been bad enough to outright cut him? I think he's right on the line. I would say maybe yes, but I'm really curious to see what ends up happening with Treylon Burks.
They also have a new rule this year where a player does not have to make your initial 53-man roster in order to be brought back from injured reserve. If they wanted to open the season with him, if he's still working back from the ACL, with him on IR, short-term IR, and after the first month or so of the season, if there's an injury in the wide receiver room, then they activate him. Of course, you still have a limit on how many guys you can activate, but it's a pretty big number. I think it's like 8 or 9 guys that you can activate throughout the course of a full season. So if they wanted to if they really had hopes for, somehow bringing his career back from the dead, that could be a way to do it. But I think the most likely outcome is that he is cut. And honestly, could he be a practice squad candidate? The rules are different now. Ever since COVID, basically veteran, like the practice squad is for anybody that you want to just keep around your facility and eventually maybe call up someone who knows your playbook. I don't think that would be the case, but I'm not ruling it out either.
He'll start over that, I think. Like he'll have,
he'll
have options, right? Like he'll have other options, even if it's. He'll probably get onto a 53, but if it's a practice squad, he'll have 25 other options.
Yeah, true.
As a former first rounder.
We'll see what happens with Treylon Burks, but as of right now, I would not expect him to make the Titans 2025 53-man roster. What do you got? Any other name? Is there a name you want to throw out there, Justin?
Yeah, I'll throw out offensive tackle Jaelyn Duncan. This is one that I'm torn on as well. 6th-round pick a couple years ago. We thought, there's a chance for him to be a steal there. Well, that's not the case. NFL teams knew what they were doing on Jaelyn Duncan. Pretty good reason he's a 6th rounder. The reason I think this conversation is more interesting than most realize is part of it may have been they were so desperate for solutions, which they were. They were trying to throw shit at the wall to see what stuck at tackle last year. But they were really interested in trying to get Jaelyn Duncan playing time last year. And every time they tried, he got hurt and left and didn't come back. I think it was twice where they put him into a game and he got hurt after 5 to 10 plays, and he just couldn't get back into the lineup. They are so bad at swing tackle. I keep saying this. It's probably the worst position on the roster. We're more so ignoring it because at least it's not a starting position, right? What they have at starting edge is more concerning than swing tackle because you hope you never see your swing tackle. But the spot at swing tackle is so bad. It's Jaelyn Duncan, Blake Hance, Brendan Crenshaw-Dixon, who's a rookie year UDFA. So maybe Duncan still makes this team.
John Ojukwu is the other guy in the mix.
Still there as well as a 3rd-year UDFA now, I think. Yeah, 3rd-year UDFA. Came in the same year as Duncan. So, there's a chance where Duncan does make this roster. I tend to lean he doesn't. You look really confused. Is it John Ojukwu? I think he's a 3rd year.
You're not right. He's going into his 3rd year. So yes,
just
like
Jaelyn Duncan is. Yeah. Okay. I think there's a chance Duncan still makes a team. I lean no. I tend to leave him off my way too early 53-man roster projections. But they're so bad at that spot. Again, it depends how many when I do. Okay, I think I've talked about this, but when I do a 53-man roster projection, I want to get into it too much, but I keep 9 linemen. Okay, so 4 backups. 3 of my backups are Corey Levin, Jackson Slater, and Blake Hance. Think they're keeping all those guys. They're not going to only keep 8. They're going to keep 9. At least. And they shouldn't keep 10 because they're not good enough to keep 10. And you can get away with 9. The 9th has got to be someone that can play tackle. because Corey Levin and Jackson Slater can't, right? So the ninth's got to be a tackle. And I've already got Blake Hance on there who can play both. So is it Jaelyn Duncan? Is it John Njoku? Is it Brendan Crenshaw-Dixon? This is a prime spot for a waiver claim. It maybe is someone that they get a better player elsewhere. Like, you don't get good tackles on waiver claims. I want to make that clear. But their situation is so bad, there probably is one slightly better than what they're going to have to, they're forced to keep if they keep a second reserve tackle, right? Yeah. Blake Hance is number one.
I think that's the biggest thing that Jaelyn Duncan has going for him is that the competition is so poor at his position that it gives him a chance to get reps in training camp and in the preseason and, prove that he does belong, because based on what we've seen so far in his career, I would say he probably doesn't belong. But that it's not just, like you said, it's not just the Titans tackle play. Like, tackle depth across the league is something that almost every team is struggling with. And the really good teams, one of the reasons they're really good teams is because this is a position that they are solid at, from top to bottom on their roster. And I agree with you that this is somewhere, because the Titans have the number one spot in waiver priority, that they might be able to find someone here if there is a team that is just loaded at this position and has to let one guy go. That's your best hope for getting for the Titans to get their ninth best offensive lineman, because there aren't 9 offensive linemen on the Titans roster worth keeping. But like you said, you can't go into a season with only 8. So this will be a very interesting spot to see. Like, I personally would lean towards Duncan maybe makes the initial 53 if he can beat out the UDFA Brendan Crenshaw-Dixon and John Njoku, that he makes the initial 53, but then he's like first guy off the roster if there's a waiver claim out there that they like. So I'll be curious to see how this plays out. I'll be really curious to see, is he getting entire second halves in the preseason? Does he play the entire third preseason game, for example, and like where those reps are distributed? Because this is my biggest concern for the Titans 2025 season is like, if guys start getting hurt at some of these crucial positions, it is going to be really hard to watch some of these certain positions play, and tackle is like chief among one of the top ones there.
Yeah, number one, and I'm curious to see what happens with him, because I feel confident that they're intrigued by him. He's got NFL caliber size, right, and strength even, I would add as well. It's more so, can he stay healthy and can he kind of stop the mistakes, and does he have just enough foot speed to survive? So I think that's his biggest concern from a technical standpoint or a player profile standpoint is foot speed. But can he stay healthy? And that's been a problem for him. Certainly it was last season. I'll throw a name at you. I know I just went, but we're only going to spend 2 minutes on this one because we got more interesting ones to talk about. Colton Dowell. I mean, it's a foregone conclusion. He's like the 10th best wide receiver, 11th best wide receiver on the team right now. He was a height, weight, speed draft pick. He got hurt his second year, I think it was, after the first, or maybe it was at the end of the first year, but he was at the end of the first year. Yeah, he tore his ACL, I think, as a rookie in week 17 or week 18. It was a dart throw because of size and speed and athleticism. He didn't really show any. I mean, he was a small school 7th rounder. He didn't get to show anything as a rookie. Then he got hurt. Spent all of last year essentially redshirting, coming back from that injury. There's really no. I mean, maybe he ends up on the practice squad, but they're not keeping Colton Dowell on the 53.
I agree, and I'll throw another receiver out there that is, on this list as well, and that's Jha'Quan Jackson. And they've again, previous regime drafted Jha'Quan Jackson. They have guys now that fill his role with a higher either draft pedigree or just a free agent profile, whether it's like James Prochet, Chimere Dike. There's just We've talked about 4 guys, and 3 of them so far have been wide receivers. And that's a testament to what they did this offseason in completely remaking that wide receiver room. And the impacts of that are that guys that were in that room before are not going to be there anymore. And Jha'Quan Jackson, to me, is another guy who, he was also a late day 3 draft pick, 6th round guy who doesn't have the physical profile to be an every down NFL wide receiver. And then when he got his chances to be a returner, he fumbled punts and made bad decisions, and I don't know that he has really been what the previous regime who drafted him hoped he would be. Granted, again, it was another one of those late-round dart throws, but I think there are other guys that can do what he can do that the Titans' new regime is going to like better than Jha'Quan Jackson. And I kind of like Jha'Quan Jackson coming out of Tulane, but I don't think he's quite an NFL quality starting player, especially starting player, and maybe not even an NFL quality backup. So I don't think Jha'Quan Jackson makes the roster.
Yeah, I might have to take an L on Jha'Quan Jackson because if you'll remember, I defended that pick vehemently, if you will. But you said it. I'll expand slightly. He's small, so it's a slot receiver thing. Well, they've got Tyler Lockett, they've got Xavier Estrepo, they got Shimere DK. And then the first two names you mentioned, special teams, they brought in James Prochet. DK can double in that role. Like Mason Kinsey was a better returner last year. That's another receiver, right? Was a better returner than Jha'Quan Jackson was last year. So really hard to figure out the pathway. I'll tell you what, though, I would add him to the practice squad. He's got enough speed and playmaking ability where I could commit trying to develop some of that, bad decision making out of his game, and maybe he could still be useful down the line. I think there's a decent chance that he still ends up on the practice squad.
Yeah, and injury insurance, because again, he can fill that specific role that they have other players to fill. But if multiple or one even of those guys gets hurt, then he could step up as the primary backup and eventually, be that guy if it was a injury riddled season. So I'm with you on that one. Let's throw another name out there. This one could be a little more interesting. We're getting spicier as we go here, and I think we have 3 names left we're going to talk about. Why did you put, because you put this name on the list, Jaylen Harrell in this category?
Yeah, I mean, Jaylen Harrell was not good last year, right? Like, it's just, I think I had the number in front of me, but I think it was 129 pass rushing snaps last year for him. If you include minimum qualifiers, Pro Football Focus, lowest pass rush win rate out of any edge in the NFL. Like, he just did absolutely nothing. And it's a sophomore 7th round pick. I don't think 7th round picks should have long enough leashes to make it through a sophomore season without showing anything. Now, I do think there's a chance he makes the team because, again, this is another waiver wire spot potentially, right? Because it's like we know they've got Draymond Jones and Arden Key and Lorenzo Carter and Femi Oladejo. Those are just 4 edges who are obviously ahead of him. They're going to play the majority of snaps for the Titans at edge this year unless they go out and get like a Zadarius Smith, which I don't think is happening at this point. But 4 is a little light, so you got to keep a 5th. Well, he's in contention with who? There's a UDFA they signed out of North Carolina. The name escapes me right now. Desmond Evans, I believe is his name. Desmond Evans, UDFA out of North Carolina, who went to UNC as like a 5-star recruit, by the way, out of high school. Like big-time recruit, but never lived up in college, but they're still trying to put it together. And then it's Ali Gay, who played a little bit for them last year. He's big, he's long. He played a bit more, I think, than Jaylen Harrell did at times. So I think Jaylen Harrell should be in a fight for his life for that roster spot. What works for him, again, like Jaelyn Duncan, they're probably keeping 5 edges, and there's not a lot of talent he's competing against. And do you remember, he was his name kept popping in training camp last year, and he looked okay in preseason. Then the regular season came, and he just did nothing with his limited opportunity. So I'm not saying he's for sure going to get cut, but he should definitely be on the roster bubble. It should be an equal battle. This isn't like a former first rounder that's got a longer leash. No, he should have to outright outperform Desmond Evans and Ali Gay in training camp to get that 5th and final spot and the preseason. And then they should definitely be looking at the waiver wire for that 5th spot at edge. Because for me, Jaylen Harrell is no better than 50-50 to make this team.
Yeah, I can't make an argument for him either, so I pretty much am in full agreement with what you said there. So let's move on. I'll throw out another name here, and we're getting spicier and spicier as we go. Josh Whyle. Now, I listened to, recent F Words podcast where Zach and Stoney projected out their 53-man roster, and they left off Josh Whyle in favor, I think, of I think it was David Martin Robinson even, who they kept over him. And I think, this team just drafted Gunnar Helm. Chigga is obviously going to make the team. And then the question becomes, do they keep 3 tight ends? Do they keep 4? Did they learn anything, or do they keep 5 tight ends again? I don't think that's going to happen because of the special teams implications, and we saw how much of a disaster that was last year. Do they want an inline guy? Because Chigga, Gunnar Helm and Chig, I think, can both sort of play both, but they're also both better suited to be primarily pass-catching tight ends. They can help out in the run game. They can maybe chip a guy in pass protection, but they're not going to be sealing off a defensive end like playing the fullback role. Maybe you line them up there just because you have to. But do they get a guy that fills that other role, because if they want that other role, it's not Josh Whyle. And then you wonder, like, how long is it going to take Gunnar Helm to pass Josh Whyle on the depth chart and basically take the role that he has tried to carve out for himself, but also failed to be very consistent. We all liked Josh Whyle. I mean,
so that's been tough.
That's true too, and the injuries definitely play a factor. But do you remember last season, the whole training camp discussion around the tight ends was, is Josh Whyle actually tight end 1? No, that's the answer. No, he was not actually tight end 1. So does he even make the team now is where the question is this offseason.
I get where you're coming from. This is the name I disagree with the most on the list.
Oh, this is the name you disagree with the most. I thought the next name would be. I would have flipped the order then for dramatics effect's sake.
No, I think the next, okay, let me say this. I think the next one we're going to throw out, neither of us actually believe that he probably won't make it. Whereas with this one, I'm getting the vibe that you think it's a possibility. And then you mentioned Zach and Stoney, and I disagree. A couple of things. Number one, keeping David Martin Robinson over him, I think would be really stupid. Because David Martin Robinson only catches. He does not block at all, okay? And Chig is not that good of a blocker, and Gunnar Helm is a rookie. So I think that's stupid. I think there's no way in hell.
Time out. If you also listen to F-Word's pod out there, tell me if I'm right that it was David Martin Robinson that they kept over Whyle.
I could be attacking them for no reason at all.
Yeah, I could have the wrong, and I would hate to, I don't want to blow back.
I can't imagine them keeping, I can't imagine them keeping David Martin Robinson over Josh Whyle, because David Martin Robinson does not block. And Chig is just okay at it. He's small. He gives good effort, but he's undersized. Gunnar Helm's a rookie. I think he's going to be okay to decent at it, but he's a rookie, and I think he's going to be a pretty good pass catcher as well. I do think he'll be better than Chig as a blocker in the long run, but we'll see as a rookie. This team lost Nick Van Nett, or they haven't brought back Nick Van Nett. I almost see Josh Whyle becoming the new Nick Van Nett. I think out of those three tight ends, Chig, Josh Whyle, and Gunnar Helm, Josh Whyley's the best inline blocker, and that's why I think he makes the roster and has a more direct path than a David Martin Robinson. Where this conversation could get a little interesting, and I might forfeit a little bit, is Thomas Udokoya. Where does he come up? I feel like we've been projecting Thomas Udokoya to make the roster for 7 straight seasons, and it still hasn't happened.
Well, obviously not 7.
Long. You know where I'm at, but so it's like they've had an international exemption for 84 years on Thomas Udokoya. It's like the Titanic meme. Yeah. But when it comes to him, he might make that conversation interesting, because I think maybe he's a better blocker than Josh Whyle, and they give Josh Whyley's roster spot to Thomas Udokoya. Ultimately, I'm not predicting that. I think Josh Whyle definitely makes this team if he's healthy. I think that's because he's the best blocker between himself, Chig, and Gunnar Helm. And I don't think they're going to keep Martin Robinson or Udokoya on the 53. I disagree with this one. I've got Josh Whyle on the team.
I do think there's a chance that the coaching staff could have approached Whyle sometime after the draft or in minicamp or whenever and said to him, like, hey, look, we're challenging you. We need this role filled, and we're going to give you first crack at filling this role. The Nick Van Nett role, the inline blocker, Jeff Swaim, Luke Stalker, who, by the way, is the Titans tight end coach.
Exactly.
That they potentially went to Whyle and said, you are going to have first chance to win this job, but if you can't do it, then we might have to move on. I don't know if they. I don't know how coaches talk to players, but
Help's a huge question mark. Concussions are no joke. He's had more than one. He wears the special helmet. He's one of pretty few NFL players who do.
Guardian cap.
The Guardian cap. That's what it's called. Okay, you know what I meant by the special helmet.
All right, we got one left. Justin. Let's get to it. Now, like you kind of teased, I don't know if either one of us truly believes that this player will not make the roster, but I do think there is a chance, and the title is players at risk of getting cut, not former draft picks who are definitely not making the roster. It's risk, and there is a risk that depending on what they decide to do at this position and how he performs, and if he can stay healthy, which has been an issue, does Cedric Gray, this is the only guy we're talking about who has a chance to win a starting job, or potentially be cut from the team completely. So Cedric Gray and James Williams, we know, are competing for that starting inside linebacker job next to Cody Barton, but there are other names in the mix. Anthony Orji has gotten a lot of hype as, a guy who's played good snaps in the NFL before, and maybe not as a starter, but in relief, come in and done well. And perhaps he wins that job or wins a high-level backup job. UDFA Hook'em boy David Menda is in the mix as well. And I think the official MCA podcast position on Otis Reese is that he's better than everyone thinks. So that's a lot of competition for not a lot of spots. How many inside linebackers do they even keep? This is a position where you have to contribute on special teams if you're not a starter. And can Cedric Gray live up to the draft pedigree that he's the highest drafted guy out of everyone I just named, 4th round pick, but done by a previous regime who, it seemed by the end of that regime, Ran Carthon's regime, there wasn't a lot of confidence in the decisions made, and some decisions were immediately undone, especially at the inside linebacker position. So you have to wonder where Cedric Gray even stands with this new coaching staff. And you can't ask them because they're going to tell you everyone's amazing, everyone's doing a really good job, and we're really proud and happy with where everyone's at.
I'm not, again, I get why we're having this conversation, and I agree with having it. And as far as I'm willing to go is this. It's not bold, I guess, but Cedric Gray's not a starter in week 1. I think it's James Williams. I think James Williams is going to win this battle.
I do
too.
They
just seem to have a bit more bass in their voice when they talk about James Williams. Jim Wyatt put out a story today about James Williams going into year 2, seeing things faster, game slowing down. I think James Williams is going to win that job. Okay? And there's another conversation we'll have there about roster building that I find fascinating, but this is not the episode for it, most likely. I think James Williams wins that job. Does Cedric Gray get outright cut? Probably not. I think, Otis Reese wasn't healthy at OTAs or minicamp, and they sounded a little frustrated with that he wasn't ready to practice. I mean, that position's going to be decided at training camp. Callahan said that a bunch, right? The pads come on. So he's still got a chance to salvage it, but he's got to stay healthy. Anthony Orji, they got 2 linebackers you didn't even mention. No one knows who they are. Curtis Jacobs and Amari Burney, I believe is the other one's name. Special teams guys. But it's you're right. There's so much competition in there. Cedric Gray was so disappointing last year from a health perspective. He's at least got to be healthy and show something in camp to win a roster spot. But I think ultimately he's got a long enough leash where they will hold on to him. But I don't think he's going to be a week 1 starter.
Yeah, I think, typically I wouldn't talk about a 4th round pick getting cut in his second training camp being a realistic possibility, just because teams don't typically tend to operate that way. If they invest a 4th round pick in somebody, they want to at least give it a chance to pay off. But because it was a previous GM who did it, that's why I could see the argument. At the same time, I'm with you. I think if he doesn't win the starting job, he's going to be probably your first or maybe second guy off the bench. I think he's going to be on all of your team's units as a primary guy there. And I do think that there's a lot of buzz building around James Williams potentially being at the leader of the pack for this position right now. Could be echo chamber related, because I'm also hearing, people like Easton Freeze have said they think James Williams is ahead, and you've said it and other people have said it. And if we all keep saying it, then we all say it to each other, and then we all just think it. So maybe that's part of it, but
that's what happened with the Josh Whyle tight end 1 stuff last year.
Yeah, exactly. And I think James Williams put good stuff on tape last year. And I was excited about what he did in the preseason, and when he got his chances late in the year, that he played pretty good football for a rookie transitioning from safety to linebacker, that it's enough for me to, based on the information we have right now, to say I do think he probably wins the job. But that would just mean Cedric Gray is your 3rd or maybe 4th linebacker. I don't think Gray falls so far as to being your 5th, 6th off the team. No. So there is a risk there. If he can't stay healthy or if he can't put it together, there is a risk. But I think it's the lowest risk of all the guys we just talked about. Yeah. And that's the list. We did it. We covered the veteran former draft picks at risk of getting cut this training camp. Anything else you want to add, Justin?
No, it's important to do this. Training camp, it's about roster building, how Mike Borgonzi's looking for depth, how he's looking to revamp the poor roster that he inherited. So when you miss on draft picks, that's what makes bad football teams. Titans have missed on a lot of draft picks in the last 5-6 years. That's why they're a bad football. That's why they went from pretty good to really bad, really fast. To be honest with you, that's how life hits you in the NFL. So important to have this discussion and talk about how they're going to continue revamping this roster. And these are the draft picks of the previous regime. Thankfully, most of these guys, we had some, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round picks in here. But these are the ones that they're going to have to keep turning over. And we had one first rounder in Treylon Burks.
And a 2nd rounder already got cut in Nicholas Petit-Frere. So
3rd rounder. He was a 3rd rounder.
3rd rounder. I always get Dylan Radins and Nicholas Petit-Frere's draft positioning mixed up in my mind. But day 2 pick cut already earlier this offseason. And there you go. So if this team really wants to be draft and develop, hopefully this is the last podcast we do talking about something like next year. We can't be doing this if the Titans want to be where they're going to get. So thanks to everyone for tuning in. If you're still watching and you left a comment at the top of the show about which guys you think we were going to discuss, let us know if you were right or wrong in the comments below now. If you're surprised by the names we dropped, or if there were other names you were thinking of that we didn't hit, let us know in the comments below. And if you're still watching this, thank you. We appreciate you. That means you liked it, because otherwise you wouldn't still be here, or at least you've been entertained enough to sit through it all, which means that if you're not already, you should subscribe to the channel, the Music City Audible channel. Give this video a thumbs up, like, and we'll be back soon. Remember to check out the link to the Sinkers 40th birthday jamboree in the podcast description. Until next time, y'all stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.